This is the Jotted Journal, and it is a hardcover notebook / journal hybrid, but officially it's considered a journal on their website, and you'll see what I mean when we get into it. But the kind folks over at Jotted sent this out for me to try out and show you all, and so far I'm liking what I'm seeing. It's hardcover, has a nice strap to hold it together. It has two little bookmarks, and it does have a folder in the back you can store some stuff in. It has 120 GSM paper, which I love. And I think it's important to try out new things because you never know when the new thing that you try out might be the very thing that you need for the season of life that you're in. And so let's head over to the desk. I'll show you how I'm using this, what I really like about it, and maybe some of my apprehensions that I have about some of it. But yeah, let's just get into it over here. And so here's our field notes, what we normally use. As you can tell, it's a lot smaller than the Jotted Journal, but let's get rid of it because this isn't about that. And so let's check out this journal. Now, I haven't filled out all of this, but little information or a little spot you can write your information here in the front. You can actually make a content directory, which is really nice. And then there's a lot of open pages, which I'm a little bit torn between because I like having a little bit of structure, like just tell me what to do here. But at the same time, it is nice to have just open space that you can do whatever you want. And then we have our months at a glance section where we can fill out our different months. I filled out July because that's what the month I'm going to be using this in. Next, we have this goals section, and these are going to be some long overarching goals and just some important information, maybe stuff that you need to have with you, like login information or just things that you really need to know on a regular basis, notable notes. And then we have another blank space. Like I said, there's a lot of blank spaces. And then you have your cover page of the month. So you can design, you can write July in here and I can design it, with the theme of July, maybe some fireworks, or just write July or just leave it blank. And then we have our month view. And you can see, you can circle the month that we have on the side here. And then I started to write the numbers. And they just give you little spots where you can just write the day numbers. And, pretty self-explanatory. You just fill it out. And in these blocks, you could probably write 2 or 3 different major events for each day. I know I mentioned my field notes video. That's big enough to kind of write one. Because really, most days usually have one major thing you need to do. But sometimes, there are 2 or 3 things that might happen in a day. You might have a meeting in the morning, you have go for lunch with somebody, and you have something going on in the evening. You can kind of squeeze that all in there if you want. And just a short interjection here to remind you to subscribe if you aren't subscribed already, because I'm going to be doing a full month review after all this is said and done. And also make sure you check out our email list. The information for that is down in the description below. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, and you can always unsubscribe later if you don't feel like getting my emails anymore. And so here we have our monthly focus pages. And we can establish some goals that we have for the month and some to-do lists for the month. And then we have some habit trackers. And so I just have some basic ones: read the Bible, pray, meditate, exercise. Not doing too good here. And then there's room for some more, and I'll probably add more as I continue to fill this up. And then you can have some spots to track whatever you want, like if you're reading a book, how that's going, maybe how many pages you read this month, podcast, whatever. You can track anything. And then here's a space for lists, trackers, or a brain dump. I decided to use it as a brain dump. I like writing just whatever I can think of that needs done down here. And so I started on those, and I assign a few of those to various weeks. And usually in my brain dumps, I'll cross stuff off when I'm done. So you could do that. Like I got this item done, so you can cross it off, or you can shift everything to the side. And because it's dot grid, you have a nice format to draw squares, and you can check mark them, highlight them, whatever you like to do. On the next page, I haven't filled these out yet, but these are nice because you can even graph out your progress. So you can write down even more information, like tracking your sleep and your mood for all of these days. And then we have our week view. And so I have this first week kind of filled out. It wasn't too crazy of a week, but this was the first week in July. So I wanted to start exercising on the walking pad again, which I did. So I like crossing my to-do lists out because it makes, just crossing it out, getting it done. I know some people, they like the check marks better, but whatever, whatever you like to do. Also, I got this stuff done. And then you could do a couple different things here for your weekly view. You could just kind of, well, number one, you're going to date your days here. So Monday was still the 30th. And then, we started the new month on Tuesday. And I just wrote in just some things here that we did, grocery shopping. I was working from 8 to 4:30, visited a campsite with my parents. And then Wednesday, I decided to just write out like a time block to see how this would work. And there's plenty of room here if you had a line for each hour and, and then some. But it was kind of a waste for me to time block this much just for work. This is probably a little bit more realistic for me and what I'm going to do more often than like try to time block each hour on each line. It's just not enough room for me to write in. Plus, it is a waste. But after this page, we have some spots for some weekly reflection. Reflect on your wins, challenges, and any key takeaways. Utilize the space for additional lists, trackers, notes, or creative space. So y'all know I like to do my recaps. I do a monthly recap in my field notes. I have a little section for a weekly recap. But it is kind of hard to like cram everything in there. And so this is a nice big section where you can recap everything that happened in your week. And then you have more blank space. And now, if I'm going to be honest, like all of these big blank spaces that are just like fill it up with whatever, like that is really good for somebody who is super creative, but it intimidates me a little bit. And so I'm curious to see if I even use these or how much I use them, because I get a little bit of notebook anxiety whenever I am starting one out or picking a new one. Like not my monthly field notes, but if I'm picking a notebook for something else, like what do I write it in, or how am I going to structure it, or what am I going to write on which page? I get a little bit of anxiety about that for some reason, and you really just overcome that just by kind of being reckless, honestly, and just saying, you know what, it doesn't have to be perfect. Oh, this page is no longer perfect, so it doesn't matter what I put on here. That might feel or look a little sloppy and like, why did you just ruin that page? But for me, it just takes the pressure off of like, this needs to be a perfect portrait or a chart or whatever. And so after these 2 pages, we repeat the process and we fill out our weeks, and then we have our end of month spread. And this is just says end of month. That's it. You can do whatever you want in here once again. And then we have our cover page of the month over here for our next month, which will be August, and we would fill it out and go from there. But I do like this as a monthly recap, because my monthly recap, everything gets really squished into a field note size page. Like one page is this big, and it is hard to recap everything in there. So I do think I could easily fit maybe 1.5 pages of this. Now on the back of the notebook here, you can see I've done a bit of a test, because I don't like it when my pages bleed through, and I really don't even like ghosting. Like the Leuchtturm notebooks are nice, but I don't like how thin the paper is. And field notes I think are pretty good. They don't really bleed. There's a little bit of ghosting that happens depending on what kind of pen you use. Pilot fountain pens, Sharpie S Gel, Pilot G2, an acrylic marker pen, Sharpies, highlighters, regular pens. All of them performed exceptionally well. I mean, here it is. And you can barely see anything on the opposite side. I'm even holding it up to the light. If I press it down, you can see maybe a little bit. And it's actually interesting. What you can see most is the red Sharpie marker. And I wouldn't have really expected that. The black one is here as well, but it's not as pronounced as the red. But they also say watercolor works well in these pages just because they're so thick. So I'm going to use this for the month of July alongside my pocket notebook. And I do like how I can see kind of like a high level glance of things like habit trackers and brain dumps, because I can't fit all this in here. And sometimes, it's easy to forget some of these things if it's not with you all the time, or is it just not wrote out in your planner. And so, I like using this, but I'm excited to see how this works, because maybe this is going to start working better for me, and I can use my pocket notebooks for something else. And so if you want to check out the Jotted Journal, there is a link down in the description below. And also you can get 10% off your order if you use the coupon code Tyler10. And big thanks for Jotted for sending this out. They didn't sponsor this video. They didn't pay me to say anything. I just wanted to feature this and just show you that I'm trying something new.